Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to show you the new and improved setup/debloat guide. I've taken the time to write everything out, and I hope that this will flow nicely in a natural order. As always, each tweak will be marked by a timestamp, so if you don't need to know how to swap the SSD or do the ASUS cloud recovery, then you can skip through to after I have Windows set up and running. This is meant to serve as an all-in-one fresh install and debloat guide. There are still some things I don't directly mention in this video, so if you feel like scrubbing through my old video, there are a couple more, such as changing the paging file. However, in my testing, this did not prove any meaningful performance boost, so I wouldn't really bother. To start things off with the SSD swap, we'll want to remove the 6 screws on the back of the ASUS ROG Ally. Note that the bottom center screw is captive, and it does not remove fully from the back panel. It's best practice to keep track of which screw came from where. With the screws removed, you can then use a plastic spudger or guitar pick, or something similar, as long as it's plastic so you won't gouge or scratch the device. Getting in from the side of the device near the top closest to the trigger would likely be easiest, but you can get in from the bottom like I did here. With the backplate removed, before removing the SSD, it is best practice to unplug the battery. This is the little white tipped cable plugging in south of the flap. We can then lift open the flap and reveal the SSD. Note when removing this SSD, it will come straight out. It does not pop up like a traditional M.2 drive. Once the SSD has been replaced, we then do everything in reverse, and then the whole process should take about 5 to 8 minutes, if that. Once we have the device put back together, power back on, we'll be brought back into the ASUS BIOS. If you've never seen this before, don't worry. Press Y and move right into the Advanced tab. Go into ASUS Cloud Recovery from here. Just note, I've heard on older BIOS that you may have to re-enable Secure Boot in the Security tab in this BIOS section. But once inside, it'll ask you to sign your LifeWay and then connect to your local Wi-Fi point. After doing so, it'll download everything and begin the process. Note, before starting this, ensure your device is plugged in and you remove the SD card beforehand. I have seen some reports of people being locked in this stage due to having the SD card still in. I stopped recording at this point, but it did take about 8 to 9 minutes to complete the download stage. This will depend on your speed. Once you're finished, it'll ask if you want to back up your files first. This would be handy if you're reformatting an existing device, but otherwise just hit no to proceed. Then yes for the cloud recovery process. This part took the longest in my opinion, about 30 to 40 minutes, as I was not watching the clock too much. I was busy trying to save my Steam Deck actually. But anyway, once that part's finished, it'll then launch into preparing, and then your device will reset a few times and it'll boot into Windows. Load into cloud recovery and then download more files and reboot several more times. I think my device maybe about 6 times in total. But after that's finished, Windows setup is a breeze and it acts like normal. The buttons seem to work actually more naturally, and it did seem to be a lot better this time around than at launch. There is a trick also to bypass logging in for Windows. So when it asks you to type in your Windows whatever account, just type in no@thanks.com and then go to password and enter no thanks, all one word. And it'll say something along the lines that this has been used too many times and it's been errored out and you can't log in. And then you'll be able to load into like a local kind of offline account. There are other kind of common mass spam emails out there that you can use to bypass, but I've used this one to bypass it on my Steam Deck a few months ago and it still worked then, so it should still work now. If not, just go find out what the latest one is. When we first get into Windows, what you'll have to unfortunately do is update everything. First, I would recommend going into Armoury Create SE and updating everything in there, found in Content under Update Center. Hit check for updates, then ensure they are all up to date before moving on to the next step. Hitting the Armoury Create button on the right hand side of the device underneath the Start button. That'll bring you to the desktop, then hit My ASUS app. It's the blue little app that kind of looks like an M and an A, kind of, sort of. Anyway, once you're inside there, hit the little laptop icon. It's right above the blue box that says My ASUS Switch or ASUS Switch. This is where you'll find all major BIOS software and other kind of like GPU updates specific to the ROG Ally. It's always best practice to check out the driver site as well, as I find sometimes updates get pushed out a little bit sooner to the website as opposed to the My ASUS app. However, I would only really worry about that if you were to find major bugs or performance issues. Getting back to my ASUS, you'll have your Essentials and Latest. Essentials are firmware, graphics drivers, and BIOS updates, and the latest section is your miscellaneous stuff such as internet, Bluetooth drivers, and more. When installing them in Essentials, they should auto-install no issue, but when you install the latest ones, you'll have to find or place them in a download folder. I just put them in downloads, you can put them on desktop or wherever, and then just run them individually to install them. It'll ask if you want to restart after it reinstalled, just hit no, and then restart after you've done the final one. Just note, while you're still inside my ASUS at this section, if you go under Diagnostics on the top left-hand side there, in the Update Center, you can navigate over to the right on the top swipe menu, and then you'll find an app called Memory Cleanup. This will kill background processes and free up RAM. Razer has a similar app that's called Cortex or something, but this Razer Cortex will auto-detect on game launch and do the same thing. To what effect, who knows, but it never hurts to get more free RAM, I guess. With all those up to date, we can then go over to Windows settings, and then go down to the bottom left hand side where it says Windows Update. Same idea here, just keep hitting the download and install until the sun doesn't shine anymore, and then even after restarting likely a couple more times, double check it until it finally says you are up to date. And once that's out of the way, we can now finally get on to the more exciting stuff. Now that all the updates are done, I want to get into Armoury Crate SE with all the ins and outs of that, or at least the major things I should mention. Going over to the settings first, we'll find Control Mode, Edit Command Center, and then quick other toggles along the bottom. The main one we'll focus on are the Operating Mode, Control Mode, and then Editing Command Center. The other stuff is a little self-explanatory, with Game Visual being the honorable mention here, because it will change the temperature and saturation of the screen. I prefer Vivid, but go into your favorite game and mess around with it until you find whichever one works best for you. And then you can have this as a quick toggle in the Command Center as well. While in there, you feel free to add in more shortcuts. I recommend having the ones I have shown here, at least on the top 4 rows. Getting into operating mode, this is where we can really tweak things to our liking. What I highly recommend is to throw automatic settings out the window unless you're using performance mode. However, even in those cases, I would recommend even going with a manual fan curve and lock your SPL and SPPT to the same values. This will prevent you from getting diminished FPS in your games 2 minutes in. FPPT can be maxed out if you like, as this is only for a 2-second boost. Moving down to the bottom of the page, this is where we'll have our manual fan curves. I usually set my fan to hit 80% or so at 80 degrees, 90 at 90, and so on. Play with it though to your liking. In 15 watt mode, you won't notice the fans overly. However, if you are docking your Ally or plugging in, I definitely recommend that you set a more aggressive fan curve. This will ensure you do not thermal throttle during your gameplay, as it's been widely misreported that the issue of BIOS 319, in my opinion. This should help with the risk of recent reports of SD cards failing in the ROG Ally as well. Now keep in mind I'm not a technical engineer, however knowing that heat kills electronics and SD cards are not meant to be blasted with heat and making transfers at the same time, this could be the most likely culprit to the SD cards dying. If people are playing heavy games on their SD cards docked at full 30 watt power mode, if you haven't already, try to place just the tip of your finger on your SD card when running a heavy task, not even using the SD card. Hold it there for as long as you can. I tried watching a cutscene in Destiny 2 and I could not make it through the whole thing when I was in 30 watt mode. Moving along the left hand side, we have System Stats, Eco Assist, which are battery saving methods tied into hibernation. And under GPU settings, we find our VRAM limit. This will change how much system memory is assigned to our GPU. In total, we have 16 gigabytes of memory, 4 gigabytes dedicated to the GPU and 12 dedicated to the CPU or system. What you set it to will depend on your game. If it is a VRAM heavy game such as Modern Warfare 2, Forza Horizon 5, Resident Evil 4, Diablo, when running them in 1080p maxed out, you may see a performance benefit having 8 gigabytes of VRAM as opposed to 4. This would typically only be in 1080p AAA situations. Auto can sometimes offer better performance in my experience, but typically will be more in line with 4 gigabyte. I do have a more in-depth video planned to test all these out in major games, but as of right now, I would just recommend leaving it at 4 gigabyte, and then if you're playing heavier games more often, try 8 gigabytes and see. Getting into controller accuracy, you can see that my right and left trigger had to be set to 88 and 95% of them to register at full press. To do this, go into gamepad testing site that I have listed here. You'll have to change your control mode to the gamepad once on the site, and then this is done by accessing the command center with the left button below the select. And then after in here, you'll be able to see if your triggers or sticks or anything is off in any sort of way. You can then adjust the settings in Armoury Crate accordingly. I have some people I've seen needing to go down to like 66% to get their triggers to go to 100%. However, if yours were wildly inaccurate like that, I would recommend a return or refund if you still can. While still in Edge, go over to the 3-dot menu on the top right there, and then hit Settings and go down to the System and Performance. Disable the middle toggle here. Continue running apps when closed. To reference back to the Command Center menu, I want to speak on how and when to use RSR or Radeon Super Resolution. This should be used when you are playing with your native screen resolution set to 1080p. Then when you are in-game, you will change the internal resolution to 720p. This will then enable RSR when you have it toggled. As well, when using the frame rate limiter, you must enable it before starting your game, and then whatever you want to set it to, 15, 30, 45, set it to that and then launch the game. It's stupid, I know, and hopefully they come up with a more elegant solution for that. There are other apps that you can use, but that's not in the scope of this video. If you click the little arrow on the bottom right of the taskbar or search for AMD Control, you'll find this app. In here, if you follow along with the video, you can enable AMD in-game overlay. This will let you know when RSR is working correctly. As well, you can get more performance metrics if you desire. Before we get into any performance numbers or anything debloat wise, I'll just mention that for this part, if you ever have your Game Pass apps not working or Xbox game services break on you, all you have to do is go into your Xbox game services in the app section under settings, and then just go into the advanced settings in the 3-dot menu there, and then just hit repair on the app. This will work for most of the Microsoft Store apps in the app list here. Now with all the initial kind of setup stuff out of the way, I just want to show here my system RAM usage and then go through some benchmarks that I did. So all these benchmarks were done at 720p, and then I've noted when I've used FSR and at what level as well. So we can see in Gears of War 5 with the benchmark there, we got a 74.9 FPS average over our 3-run average. Cyberpunk, we got a 57.4 running FSR balanced over our 3-run average. Borderlands 3, we got 50.3 FPS average. Modern Warfare 2, 101.3 with FSR set to FSR 1 at quality. Forza Horizon 5, I wasn't able to get up and running, honestly, either in regular or debloated, so I just X that out of here. It's honestly, I have nothing but issues trying to launch Forza through Game Pass, so I want to include it with benchmarks, but it just doesn't want to cooperate, even when I haven't done anything to Windows. Just note that when you're installing different game launchers and stuff, go into the settings for them and set them to not minimize and to not start at launch. So when you close them, they close off completely. They're not running in the background. This will help as well with performance and whatever in general. Now getting into system-wide performance tweaks that will increase performance, we'll start out with using the CTT or Chris Titus Tech Debloat script, link in description. Following the GitHub link, we'll then copy the simplified link and paste it into Windows PowerShell, being sure to run it as an administrator. In this install tab, you can install programs quickly here, like the game launchers or popular bulk programs like WinZip or whatever, but you can install them all bulk here. Going into the Tweaks tab, we will enable Create a Restore Point, as this will help in case anything gets messed up or if you misclick a setting. To restore from a restore point, just go to your Windows settings and type in System Restore Point. Then also, going into the left-hand side here, we'll check off all of the boxes, except for Game DVR, if you like to record gameplay moments. If not, you can check it off. Disable Hibernation to not mess with any ASUS Hibernation marriage settings, and set services to manual. Moving to the miscellaneous tweaks, we will check off set display temperature or display to performance. I disabled UAC or user access control here. It's that little annoying pop-up that happens every time you go to install or do something to your computer. I would recommend not checking this off. However, if you're not downloading anything sketchy or weird or doing anything untoward, you should be okay. We can also remove Cortana and disable mouse acceleration. You can disable the notifications and calendar tray as well at your preference. Same goes for Edge if you like to use a different browser. Note, I have not done extensive testing on power throttling on and off yet, so leave that alone unless you feel like testing it. As well, just note that you can support CTT and buy his files to be able to use it as a clickable file and offline use. Again, it's in the link below. On to BloatyNosy, following the GitHub link, it'll download a portable app. You won't need to install anything, and once launched, we'll want to go in there and check off all of the browser options, explore, desktop taskbar, and start menu. Once we get into the system, you'll want to disable the watermark requirement and TPM check. As well, I suggest you thoroughly review the descriptions of each thing before doing this so you understand what you are doing. Under gaming, again, you can leave DVR on or off as you please and leave disable power throttling unchecked here as well. You can adjust the visual effects for best performance, and this is a system level tweak that gets rid of fancy window effects and other things. All the privacy settings can be checked except for disable apps running in the background and disable auto install of apps. Feature recommendations and bloatware can be left unchecked. Once done, hit fix and apply fixes. At this point, restart your system and check to ensure Game Pass and Xbox game services are working. Forza Horizon 5 again is a particular pain in the butt. I wasn't able to get it to work either or, but I was able to get Gears 5 and my SnowRunner working, so we're good to go with Game Pass games. Restart the Ally again, and then when it powers on, keep pressing repeatedly the volume down button. This is to ensure you still have access to BIOS manually. If you cannot do either of these things, you may have clicked something somewhere wrong or did something extra that could have broken these services. Use the Chris Titus Tech restore point thing and try it again. Next, to disable core isolation in VMP, we will go to Settings, Privacy and Security, Windows Security, Device Security, then Core Isolation Details underneath the core isolation there. And then finally, turning off memory integrity. Then for VMP, type in Turn Off Windows Features, and then clicking on the top pop-up that will bring you to this page here, where you can find VMP or Virtual Machine Platform. Doing this will force a restart, and note, on restart after changing core isolation, you will have to make a new PIN. This is a simple but tedious task. Simply type in add or remove programs in your search bar, and then get to the work on removing stuff that you don't need, namely Spotify and other bloat that you see, leaving anything ASUS alone. You can be as aggressive or minimal as you like here. Just be sensible about anything you uninstall. I also chose to uninstall Dolby Access here, as we do have Dolby certified speakers and the spatial experience should be better with it, which I can attest to. At times it can be convincing for what it is. Many people though have said that this will increase performance, so on the debloat list it goes. One final classic tweak is to disable search indexing. If you haven't disabled this already in a debloat script, type in index files into settings and it should bring up Find My Files. Set this to classic for a memory boost. And there you have it, my debloat and optimization guide done. Going over to memory usage, we can see that it dropped from 4.8 to 4.9 gigabytes in use to 4 to 4.1 gigabytes after all the debloats. And this was letting Windows run after about like 5 minutes on a fresh startup. You could run the MyASUS memory cleanup as well for further savings, but that would be something you'd have to remember manually to do each time. So as such, I'm not including that in my base performance results. Again, these benchmarks were just simple, easy ones to do, so I could just be like, yep, here we go, and performance is better or worse. I didn't bother running Afterburner to get the 1% lows. That was a little bit beyond the scope of this video, and it's subjective to the game that you're playing. But as we can see here, that after all the results and everything, with Gears of War getting a 73.4 FPS average, it stayed exactly the same. Cyberpunk, we got a 68.1, Borderlands 3, 68.2, and Modern Warfare 2, 114.3. So we can see, at least with those three games, we got a boost across the board. So not all games will benefit from these tweaks, however, I would wager a guess that most would. You should see at least some benefit, and at the very least, no change at all. I find the biggest boost to be in the 1% lows, as you'll notice this in the moments of stutter and severe FPS drop situations. Overall, your game should feel a lot smoother after this. especially while taking advantage of the VRR display and LFC. If you aren't sure what these are, I mentioned them in a previous video. However, VRR is variable refresh rate, and this is for the screen, and it runs from 48 to 120 Hz, or 48 to 120 FPS essentially. Then when below that, LFC or low frame rate compensation will kick in and double the input. So for instance, if you were getting 33 FPS, you would be running at 66 Hz. You would not benefit from any extra FPS though. This isn't like DLSS or anything like that. However, this would help in the perceived smoothness and less motion judder in the image. There's also black frame insertion app as well, but again, that's a little bit beyond the scope of this video. In the end, if you follow this guide carefully, you shouldn't have any issues with your system. I hope I helped you understand a little bit more about tweaking Windows and optimizing it to the best suit Ally's needs. As we can see, there is big performance gains to be had in the case of Modern Warfare 2, Borderlands, and Cyberpunk. If this video helped you at all, let me know in the comments on what games you're playing with it, and if it helped performance in them at all. I'd love to have a more kind of knowledge base of games and to see if it works better due to these tweaks or not. As well, it would help future viewers to see if their favorite games can be helped. That'll do it for this one though, and I hope you all have a great day.